Good evening. My name is Travis Gillum, and I am here to talk to you about the Talent Pipeline Initiative regarding the U.S. Coast Guard's competency system and position descriptions. So, without further ado, let's dive in. We're going to start today with a design thinking overview. And what design thinking essentially is it's a very humanistic approach to a problem or a challenge. Rather than approaching it from a business-centric point of view, the design thinking methodology requires that you look at challenges from a customer point of view or a stakeholder point of view. So if you were the customer, how are you experiencing this problem, and what is the best method that we can utilize for you to solve it? The idea behind this is it creates better products, services, and internal processes specifically for the customer, with the customer in mind. So the first question of a design thinker is, what's the human need behind the effort? Why are we doing this from a human-centric point of view? So, sorry, jumped ahead there for a hot second. These are the basic four questions that you ask in a design thinking process. What is, what if, what wows, and what works? You can break this down a little bit further into what those questions actually pose. The first, what is the problem or challenge? Then, what if the sky was the limit? What could you create? Of all of your ideas, what wows customers and stakeholders? And finally, within that wow, what works within the context of your organization? Now, I have a graphic off to the side here that you can see that kind of emphasizes how I feel that the design thinking process is not a linear thing. We traveled down it kind of like a waterfall style project, but it's more iterative than you would think, in that if you're truly approaching this from a customer centric mindset, you're continually wanting to improve. So as you can see, this kind of has the infinity symbol, and you can trace and kind of walk back the what is, where you're defining the problem and empathizing with the customer, to the what if for the ideation, and then the what wows is also an ideation, and then prototyping and testing for the what works. So with the process defined, let's take a look at what problem I'm trying to address. So for a very brief background, the U.S. Coast Guard, of which I'm an employee, is a organization that hires both military and civilian staff. The civilian staff are hired in a very traditional HR-centric way, via position descriptions that are posted on USA Jobs, and then they go through a screening process, an interview process, and then the hiring portion of the talent pipeline. So the problem or the challenge that we're trying to address is in the IT field for the Coast Guard. The service center that manages all these hires recently went to a cybersecurity centric position description that was generic across all hires. As you can imagine, this had pluses and minuses. One, it greatly streamlined the hiring process, because the old process was that managers had to individually write PDs that were not really based off of any competencies. So moving to this meant that that hiring happened at a much faster rate, because HR didn't have to proofread and check for sufficiency all of these position descriptions that were individually hand wrote by each individual supervisor. However, what we ended up getting a greatly mismatched candidate pool, because the PDs, or the position descriptions, did not match what we actually wanted the candidates to do. So for example, we would hire an IT professional, or we'd want to hire an IT professional that had acquisitions experience and project management experience, and had a cybersecurity certification for to meet DoD requirements. The problem is we would, by using a generic cybersecurity PD, we would meet the last, but not the first two items. Most of our candidate pool would be completely, uh, completely roped out of the hiring process or eliminated early because they didn't meet the qualifications, or if they did, that's not the job they were looking for. So it artificially limited the talent pool and greatly favored internal candidates who would know what the positions really were and what the hiring managers were really trying to do. So what if phase? Our team, after we defined the problem in the what is phase, and we interviewed the hiring managers, the HR personnel, and successful candidates on how their hiring process went, and how satisfied they were with it, what challenges they saw with it. We got to brainstorming. Now, as you can imagine, brainstorming is difficult in this type of environment because there is a tendency to be very linear with this. Also, in today's budgetary climate, we're extremely cost conscious, so it was almost impossible to eliminate the thought process that we had to do this at no cost or very limited cost. But one of the interesting things about kind of detaching your brain from the linear approach of getting from point A to point B is that design thinking and the brainstorming process really kind of brought about some interesting ideas that were nonlinear and that integrated other HR systems or other HR initiatives to kind of assist with this process. So we moved on to the what wow phase. And what the team essentially came up with was a choose your own competency model. Now, this kind of harkens back to kids of the 90s, the old choose your own adventure books, right? So what this does is, or what this proposal is for, is to integrate the core competency model that the Coast Guard uses for civilian personnel, which includes kind of tiered competencies and sub-competencies. It would be redesigning that so that it was more talent-centric, and then having little position description vignettes or extracts for each of those competencies that would then be fed into either a system or a current system or a new system that would allow a hiring manager to choose competencies from our already somewhat in place competency model and have a position description that is automatically generated, is legally and procedurally sufficient, and is fast and easy to manage as the general position descriptions. So take, for example, if you were to hire that same person who needed project management and acquisition experience as well as cybersecurity, you would select these two particular attributes or sub-competencies along with the core cybersecurity competency, and a position description would be generated for you on the fly with very little edits or required. So if we were to move on to a prototyping or testing phase, which was not within the scope of this project and not within the scope of this assignment, what the team suggests we could do is we could start with a few sub-competencies that kind of match up to some hires that are coming down the road due to recent retirements. So what we could do is we could focus on those sub-competencies that naturally fit within those hires through discussion with the hiring manager. We could rewrite those sub-competencies and create little vignettes or extracts for those subcompetencies to feed into a position description, append them to this generic cybersecurity PD, and post them for hire. At that point, we would engage the hiring managers, the HR managers, to ensure that that when we interviewed for these positions, that there was appropriate levels of questionnaires or post-interview type of feedback from the candidates, so we could understand whether or not this type of position description was more in keeping with the kind of candidates that we're trying to get. So you could, to a certain extent, do some with, some without, depending on how many vacancies there were. If once the prototyping and testing phase, which is very iterative, is complete, then at that point it would be up to leadership to decide whether or not they wanted to move forward with the full project. And the team scoped out some basic costing implications. We fundamentally believe that at least the prototyping would be very low cost. It would just involve already paid for man hours or labor hours for the development of the prototyping, and then the full costing for the full system would be more dependent on what the desired end product was, whether it would be a new system or coding this type of competency or position description, choose your own adventure position description system into a current in-state HR product. So the team also created a base project plan, which could be utilized by the implementation team to kind of be a roadmap for moving forward. So with that said, we were very excited to tackle this project. We strongly believe that this is this is an excellent way to move forward. And we're very excited to see what prototyping will produce if allowed to continue. So thank you very much, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you.